Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, the second part of our Unported Playlist Hall of Fame Induction Ceremony of 2025. Every fall for November and December, I put in games I've talked about previously on the Unported Playlist and add them to my imaginary Video Game Hall of Fame in the arcade wing, and today we are playing Violent Storm. This is the Konami game that everyone absolutely should be playing, but I basically never hear it mentioned. It has everything you want out of a beat-em-up: incredible gameplay, a great moveset, really nice graphics for its time and era, and in my opinion, the best soundtrack Konami ever put to a video game, whether it's the arcade or home console. So there's going to be a third sound sample in this video because I can't stress enough just how incredibly good this music is for the theme. Before we get too involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But for some strange reason, this game just basically gets completely forgotten about compared to everything else Konami did in the genre. You always hear about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you always hear about X-Men, Bucky O'Hare, all of the classics, but this game is every bit as good as all of those games. For some strange reason, has never been ported home and never get mentioned, and that just absolutely bums me out because it really is one of those 10 out of 10 games where I really can't find anything whatsoever to fault it about. And again, I just can't tell you enough how incredibly good this soundtrack is. It is an earworm. So here comes your first sound sample, and I'll be right back with more. I mean, honestly, the soundtrack is unlike anything else you're going to hear of the era, and it sounds like a jazzy buddy cop movie to me. If the original Lethal Weapon was basically held in a jazz club, that's the type of music you would be getting here, and it 100% just works. And again, as we go through the game, absolutely gorgeous as well, but we'll get into the graphics in just a moment. Now, the one thing Konami could do just as good as everybody else, and sometimes even better, is the hit detection and overall ability to really make a beat 'em up feel like you're hitting your opponent as hard as possible. The alignment, all of the hit detection in this game is exactly what you want in a beat 'em up, because you've all played those beat 'em ups before where you swear you're lined up with your opponent, but your kicks and your punches are just 100% whiffing. It'll drive you nuts very quickly, and Violent Storm absolutely nails it. If you miss a hit, that is because you have not lined up correctly, not because the game is giving you hell as far as the hit detection is concerned. And the game has a really strange sense of humor as well. There's these little piggies running around on the ground, and if you pick them up, they turn into footballs which you can then throw at your opponent. Why does that happen? I have no idea. Why do they put it in? Who knows, but it's absolutely hilarious and again charming. And that really is the name of the game in Violent Storm. Everything about it has a certain charm to it. It's got those classic Konami colors, playing around with some pastels and some neons now and again. It's got some really strange bosses like Joe here. That's the best name they could come up with him. He is basically a hunchback ticket puncher on a train, and his name is just Joe, and he's wearing some of the shortest cropped jeans you could possibly imagine. Or Lollipop here, a gigantic massive sumo man with a bunch of beads around his neck. Nothing in this game ever truly makes sense, including the fact that later on you're going to fight what I think is Hobgoblin as well as another demon, but they're never explained why they're in the story. It's basically like The Warriors meets a monster movie in all of the best ways possible, and also in all the strangest ways possible. It is just a theme that you don't really see that much of, and kind of feels a little bit like a sequel to Vendetta, one of Konami's earlier beat-em-ups, except now even weirder. You have 3 different characters, they all play relatively similarly, but Boris here definitely hits a little bit harder, so you'll find somebody that works for you, learn their moveset, and play through the game. And it only takes a half an hour from start to finish, so your time commitment's definitely minimal. And I assure you, if you've never played this game before, you're going to absolutely at least find it enjoyable. It might not be your new favorite of all time, but I don't think you're going to leave the game thinking it's bad. But one more soundtrack sample. This is my favorite track in the game, and I'll be right back with more. I mean, not only is that song catchy as hell, but that sound quality and that lyrical quality in a 1992 arcade game is just absolutely over the top. And it just makes me imagine Eddie Murphy playing Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop. You put that song over top, him just riding around in his convertible in Southern California, and it would make absolute contextual sense. And that is just kind of how my imagination works. I've always been a filmmaker that heavily uses music in all of his work, and when I just hear songs like that, I immediately start envisioning different things that I think it would work for. And that's how I know a track is good. If I want to use it outside of the game, I would totally put that in a film somewhere, sneak it in there, and so many people would probably never know where it came from, but they would enjoy it. And that really is the thing about Violent Storm. From start to finish, it is just enjoyable. Every single level has something new and unique. You encounter new and different characters the entire way through. And unlike other beat-em-up games, including some from Konami, there is no boss gauntlet at the end of the game. And that's something I love in a beat-em-up, when they don't just make you fight every single boss you fought already one more time before you can move on to the end of the game. It's always felt like a cheap way to get a couple more quarters out of your pockets before you get to see the ending. And I really appreciate that this title does not do it. I think the best beat-em-ups ignore the boss rush mode at the end and just let you progress to the finish. Definitely has a little bit of Final Fight vibe here as well. In some of the indoor areas, when you're going through this warehouse, there's going to be different pressure plates that will crush you or your enemies. There's also going to be some lava that will burn you. And I love that that opponent there just got completely pancaked into the ground. Definitely some light WWF Legion of Doom vibes as well, with Spike and R-Spike here. Kind of seems like Hawk and Animal, at least in my opinion, but pretty much across the entirety of the game, there is something that's going to remind you of something else. It's like the developers and artists at Konami took the best things from entertainment, from films, from television, from that era in the 80s, and decided to combine a little bit of it all together into the pot to make this game. And honestly, the result absolutely has a delicious flavor to it to keep that food pun going just a little bit longer. And when you marry that together with a super competent beat-em-up mechanic, it just works. And even some of the bosses here, if that just isn't from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with a slight change, I don't know what is. And another boss later on is definitely just going to be the human version of one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So there's definitely some self-referential material within Violent Storm that's going to remind you of some of Konami's best games. That's always a fun time when you're reminded of some of their best works. And I would say all the bosses here, outside of the final one, relatively fair as well. This game has enough challenge where you feel like you're actually being tested, but it doesn't get so cheap that you feel like you're just kind of trying to quarter feed it until you can get to the ending, kind of like a pay-to-win strategy. And if you bring a second player along for the ride, of course it's going to be even that much more fun. But that's the thing about Violent Storm. It is this good, and for some strange reason, I never hear anybody talking about it. It never shows up on any best beat-em-up games of all time lists, and I 100% think it should, and at least as the time of recording this video, it has never been ported to any other platform out there. It's either MAME or an original arcade board, and honestly, they're not the worst price. One more soundtrack sample because you know I love it, and I'll be right back. And because of course we're at the dock, so you get some surf music there as well, but Sledge here definitely just seems like what Ninja Turtle would be if they actually weren't turtles, they were just humans cosplaying as turtles. And I think that's pretty hilarious as well. You can basically see all of the inspiration on all of the bosses here. Konami borrowed from their own catalog, they borrowed from other developers, different movies, television shows, and every other source under the sun, just to kind of put together a greatest hits of all of the things that people loved in the late 80s and early 90s. And because I love Konami and I love a good arcade beat 'em up, Violent Storm definitely is my favorite beat 'em up from Konami. There's just nothing this game does wrong in my opinion. It's a perfect length, right around 30 minutes. You don't have to do a boss gauntlet mode. The graphics are absolutely outstanding so long as you don't hate pastels, and the soundtrack is varied, unique, and stuff that you would never hear in pretty much any other arcade game. And it's not like Konami doesn't have a metric crap ton of other incredible arcade beat-em-ups. They were so good in this genre, up there with the likes of Sega and Capcom with Final Fight and Streets of Rage, even though Streets of Rage is obviously a console release. But Konami knew what they were doing with a beat-em-up, and I think some of their best work actually came when they weren't using a license, because obviously this isn't based on anything other than the imagination of the developers and artists at Konami, so you can tell they absolutely loved making this game. And it's been almost 3.5 years since I last talked about this game in review format, and in that time, my love for it has not waned whatsoever, so that is why this year, for the 2025 Video Game Esoterica Unported Playlist Hall of Fame, the second inductee is Violent Storm. It is just, in my opinion, a game that does absolutely everything right, and I really can't fault it for anything it does. If you ever played it before, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, and if you haven't, you have to do it for me. Go play Violent Storm. I guarantee you're going to have fun. But we'll see you next week for the next inductee, but we're done here. Bye-bye.